Oh, wow. I really yelled that. Hello, and welcome to episode 45 of Brews Less Traveled, the podcast exploring the best uncharted craft beer cities across the United States. I'm Brian. I'm your host. Welcome back. This is a new month, and that means we've got a new city to feature, which also means new breweries, new beers, and a new co-host. So please join me in welcoming my longtime colleague, friend, and fellow Pittsburgh resident, Eric Lutz. How's it going, Eric?
Good. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be back. I was on the show last July, I think, maybe last June, and I really got to know some people that were watching the live stream, the live chat that way. And if you are still watching, just know that I do still have my McDonald's glasses, although most of them have been broken at this point. This is the last surviving McDonald's glass, but I am very excited to at least be back here and try out some of these Des Moines beers. I don't know much about Des Moines, so I'm really hoping that to learn a lot more over the next few weeks. I'm very excited for a lot of these, and it sucks that they have to just live in my fridge and wait to do these because I want to try them all like right away. How you been, Brian?
I'm doing very, very well.
Good.
My young daughter just turned 2 this week, so we had
Congratulations.
It's been great. If you didn't notice, I just panicked and forgot my headphones there. So hopefully that is all of the errors we have. Excited to drink beers. I am really excited for this as well. Excited to have you here. If you are a long-time subscriber, you'll remember Eric was with us for our second month when we featured a really, really great city, amazing city.
One of the best,
Pittsburgh,
they say.
Yeah,
They're saying it's one of the best.
From episode 6 to 9, Eric was our co-host when we featured Pittsburgh. So, welcome back, Eric. And
I feel like people should know. So, I mean, just as far as my background and our background together, Brian and I have been working together here under the City Brew Tours Unboxed Brewvana umbrella since 2018. And we were running in-person tours, and for a year it was you and I did 90% of them. Now, shout out to other Eric. I don't want to
other Eric, yes.
Yeah. Don't want to forget about other Eric, but other Eric legitimately lived 200 miles away and would come in once a week. He's a madman. But yeah, so you and I just ran the show here for a long time. And then since then, been working at a homebrew supply store for a better part of 2 years.
Yes, I believe I've mooched off of your employee discount there a couple times.
You most certainly have. This is totally fine. Just recently became a level 1 Cicerone, the beer server level 1 this past summer. Nice. And was working as a brewer at a very small brewery here that makes ciders and meads. So that unfortunately just shut down due to some personal reasons, but that just shut down. I do have something lined up in the works. I just don't want to give it away just yet until all of the all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, but there is something in the works with me at another brewery here soon. But
well, it's good to hear.
Yes, I've just been eyeing up this Farmer John's because I'm so excited to drink this one and talk about these beers. Have you mentioned what city we're gonna do yet? Did I just ignore that?
I have not gotten that far yet, so
okay,
let me rush.
Right, great.
Let's rush through.
Yes.
Let's get through this part of the outline so we can drink some beers.
Sure,
definitely. So welcome back to all of our subscribers, and a special shout out to our new subscribers for April. How yin's doing? We just wrapped up Omaha, Nebraska, and we're headed east for our next city. It's going to be Des Moines, Iowa.
I've learned just from the past 20 minutes here, I'm looking at these beers, I'm going to have a hard time not saying the S in Des Moines. When I see it written, I want to say Des Moines. And I know that's wrong, and don't yell at me. I know, I'm trying. But when I see it written out, I'm like, oh, that S is just calling my name. But today, our first brewery, Des Moines Brewery, Confluence Brewing Company, we're going to be drinking their Farmer John's Multigrain Ale, which is probably the one I'm most excited for. So I'm so glad we're drinking that one first. and we're going to be drinking the Des Moines IPA. We'll be joined by Josh Maxson, the production manager at Confluence. So he's going to tell us a little bit about their process, their philosophy, everything about them. It'll be great.
Yeah, really, really excited to talk to Josh. I visited Des Moines back in February on a very, very cold day. It was like 12 degrees when I was there. Actually, on the same trip that I went to Omaha, our last featured brewery. So I'm excited to let the cat out of the bag and talk about Des Moines and be able to talk about the full trip.
But didn't tell you, I mean, you said very cold, but didn't you tell me that people were still just like hanging out in the patio? Like maybe 12 degrees is like a Des Moines 40 degrees, you know?
Yeah, I guess they're used to it. They when I went to Confluence, it was my first stop when I got to Des Moines. When I went to Confluence, they were having their Frozen Firkin Fest, which they were serving a bunch of firkins, which, if you didn't know, is like fresh keg conditioned beers, and they're often used for experimentation in craft beer. We'll get into it later with Josh, definitely. But yeah, there was a bunch of people hanging out in the patio drinking firkin beer, and it was very, very cold. I layered up. I'm from Pittsburgh. I've been here my whole life. I've dealt with some decently cold winters, but I was very frigid that day.
You got to drink to keep you warm, I think is the goal. Yeah.
I would have been embarrassed to complain about it when I was there in person, but now that I'm in the comfort of my own office here, I will most certainly be complaining on it on this show. So
that's right. Don't be fooled, people that are in the live stream. We're not actually there. These are fake backgrounds. We're in the comfort of our homes here in Pittsburgh.
Yes. Beer? Do you want to get into this first beer?
I was just about to ask. Absolutely. Let's do it. So this is one that I was actually glad that we have some notes for it, because you don't really see a multi-grain ale. It's definitely not a common one that I see a lot. So I think a lot of time we use the malts as a backbone, especially for these hazy IPAs that everyone's making these days, and you can really play around with the hops. But the fact that we're playing around with the malts in this one, I think, is an amazing idea. Just to read off the malts, because I want the people to know. So there's 2-row malt, there's wheat malt, rye malt, and then there's actually unmalted grains as well. There's unmalted oats, unmalted corn, and rye. So I'm very excited to try this one. Cheers, Brian.
Cheers. I'm sorry. I have to confess I rushed ahead of you. And
how dare you?
Ooh. Already tried some. It is
my God.
Delicious. Really nice depth of malt character in this beer. I don't know if I've already said this. 5.7% alcohol, 21 IBUs. So really, definitely a beer designed to showcase those malts, and is doing so very much. Very drinkable, but malt forward.
I almost need to think about this a little bit, because I feel so much that with IPAs I can sort of be like, oh, I'm getting the grapefruit notes or the citrus notes, blah blah blah. But with these all these malts going on, it's harder for me to sort of pinpoint exactly what's going on here with the rye, the corn, the oats, the wheat. Wow, I mean, it has a little bit of everything in it, but it's blended in this way where everything's equal enough. I don't think there's one thing that shines through it, but they all sort of roll off the palate well enough. It's like, first you start with some of the wheat and you kind of end with maybe a little bit of the corn in the back note. Wow, this is something else. Very, very drinkable though. Nothing too crazy. A little bit of balance from the hops, just at the very end, but it's super smooth.
Yeah, very smooth. I like there's a little bit of that rye spiciness, as some people will say.
Just enough.
It's not shining out. It blends right into the overall flavor of the beer. Really, really nice, tasty beer to start things off here.
I am legitimately sad that I only have one of these. I mean, I'm also, I just want to mention this box is cool, by the way. I don't always get the boxes. These beers are great, but there's a lot of cool stuff in here, especially, I mean, no offense to Des Moines, I love you. I just don't know much about Des Moines, to be honest. It's maybe not a city that's in my wheelhouse. So it's not what I'm thinking of, and they seem like they got a lot going on there. It seems pretty cool.
Yeah, shout out to our marketing team, Taylor, Franny, Ian. Yins are awesome. Put together this awesome one sheet that we always have in the box with the sweet brew map on the back. Oh boy, green screen is just tearing that apart. Oh, there we go. Check that out. Great. And there's also a great Confluence sticker in there, as well as this Confluence flyer. Lots of great inclusions for this box, in addition to the number of great beers that are in there. So, yeah.
That's right. Well, we've been talking about it long enough. We've been talking about Des Moines. We've been talking about this brewery. I think it's time to actually get our guests in here. So again, we have production manager from Confluence, Josh Maxson.
Josh, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, 100%.
Just trying to make sure I successfully unmuted. It gave me like 3 error messages there coming in. So,
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we got you loud and clear. Awesome. So Josh, thanks for joining us.
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Could you kick us off by giving us your background in beer? How did you get started in beer? How did you make your way to working at Confluence? And
Sure. So I started in the service industry. I actually wasn't a home brewer. A lot of brewers, the vast majority of brewers, start by home brewing. I homebrewed maybe once or twice with some friends' equipment, but was always interested in it, but just like never had the space, live that apartment to apartment life. So I'm mostly in the service industry, slinging a lot of craft beer. I lived in Chicago for a short period of time, about a year and a half, near the end of college, and so really fell in love with it there through. That was kind of the period of time when Goose Island fell out of favor, right? And then Revolution and Half Acre kind of made their rise in the city.
yeah,
So drank a lot of great beer out there. Went to some of the early Fobabs out there, which was awesome, and moved back to Des Moines. When I graduated, I was in Chicago for a girl. Sometimes that doesn't work out. So, moved back to Des Moines and thought I was maybe going to enter education, and our Governor Branstad ended up cutting a bunch of jobs from education the year I graduated. So so I stuck with service industry, and I found my way to we have a Belgian beer bar downtown called the Red Monk. It's been around for a long time, and it focuses just on Belgian beer, and it's like upstairs above an English pub actually, and it was a really cool place. And so served there for a while, or bartended there for a while, but knew that I wanted to at least give brewing a shot at some point. I just love beer so much. So a Flick's Brew House actually location opened up, and a friend of a friend was going to be the head brewer. And it was located in a mall, and he was looking for an assistant brewer. So I applied. I think probably not a lot of other people applied because I got the job. But I was there from the beginning, which was kind of cool. That my first job was, I helped put in the glycol lines and the glycol system and install all of that to keep the tanks cold, and help move the tanks in and get them set up, like particularly the serving tanks. And so did a lot of that. Of course, on a shoestring budget, there were a lot of things that weren't
Jerry rigging it.
Yeah, maybe not quite the way you want them. So I think one of my favorite stories to relate is the hot side brew house was on one side of the mall, like the width of the mall, on one side of the width of the mall, and the serving tanks are on the other side and up 3 flights. And so I would do, because they're like above the bar up by the theaters, and then they tucked like the brew house equipment down in like the corner away from where it was at. So
Not thinking that you would have to get the beer.
Right. So I would our transfer line is like got to be one of the most absurd transfer lines. But I'd start the pump, down in the brewery to transfer from the fermenter to the serving tank. And then I have to like run down back hallways and up 3 flights of stairs to get to where the serving tanks were, to catch it. I was still pushing Sandy like right before the beer comes out, so I wasn't done with the beer down the drain and going to the tanks. And at that time, we only had 1 pump. I now know that they have 2. They have since gotten 2 since I left there, but they only had 1 pump at the time, and so I would have to carry it that same distance if I wanted to go up and clean like the serving vessels versus cleaning the fermenters down below. So I'd pick the pump up and carry it up, a couple flights of stairs and down the hallway. And then when we first opened, not everything had gotten done when we needed to start brewing. So for several months, actually, like longer than it should have been, the 3-phase socket upstairs wasn't finished like by the serving tank. So if I wanted to clean the tanks up there, I would carry the pump up and I would kill the breaker switch to kill all the power to the serving vessel room. And then I'd take the plug off the end of the pump and then hardwire the 3-phase into the wall with wiring nuts, and then turn the power back on and run the pump. So and those are
That's amazing.
Yeah,
but that's the sort of stuff, man. Like,
those are the good old days. You have to go through it to have to get through it. So,
sometimes people think that like brewers got it figured out, but sometimes you got to just do something like that. Like it's crazy. Takes. Yeah, it's whatever it takes. Exactly. That's awesome.
Brewing is all about cleaning and fixing problems, right?
Yeah,
that's all it is. So
that's really it, man.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like you were really there at the foundation, and you were literally installing stuff there, and now you are the production manager, and with the scope of people, sometimes people just think there's a brewery, that's a brewer. Can you talk a little bit about what a production manager's roles are in the brewery?
Sure. So kind of a little bit of background on Confluence, just to start to give context. So about this is year 4 now of releasing at least 1 beer every single week, and often it's more than that. So our general plan is like last year we released 113 beers in the year, and the year before that we released 104 different beers. I think the first year was like 75 to 78 when we were just like, can we release a beer a week? Can we keep up with that? So there's always been something new available in the tap room and in package for the last 3 years plus. And so my job as production manager is to figure out what those beers are going to be and get them into the schedule and make sure that they come out on time. So it's a lot of planning, but like every brewery job that exists, that's not, for an InBev, Budweiser brewery, something like that. My job, like that's the definition of production manager, but I manage the whole production team, obviously, just daily on the floor, like assign the daily tasks to get us from point A to point B. I have recipe development. I work with the branding and marketing. Like I write all the copy on the side of the cans, except for like a few that existed before. I think the Farmer John's I may have tweaked, but didn't write entirely from scratch. So there's just, a lot of different things, but it's all the bulk of production manager is making sure that we have beers in the pipeline ready to go, coming out fresh, and have a schedule that, our tap room and our sales and distribution staff can work with.
Cool. Just a quick follow up, because I know Brian has a question. You had like 104 beers or so. Like what's the percentage of new beers that you come out with like every year, like new recipes?
Yep. So that's a good question. I would say some of it is dependent on your definition of a new recipe. So we have 7. We usually release 6, 7, maybe 8 fruited gozes. It's called our Wizard Series a year, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we'll repeat one of them straight up from the year before if it was popular, but a lot of times it'll be like 7 new or 6 new fruited variants. Now, there's not as much to figure out, right? Like we have the base recipe, we know the souring, but you are working with, what's the right dosing rate for this fruit? Where can I source it? Those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So in that, and it's flavor that maybe people haven't had in the tap room before. So it kind of depends on your definition. There's those. We have a rotating hazy series called Extinction Event, and like every time we brew it, it's a different hop combination. But we also tweak the recipe. I mean, it obviously starts with the same base, oats and wheat that a hazy IPA is going to start with. But we do tweak the malt bill to line up with what we think the new hops that we're putting into it are going to be. So it's not starting from scratch, but it is new. But then we also have plenty of repeats as well. So I would say we're probably doing somewhere in the neighborhood of like, say out of 100, maybe 30 to 40 of those are like from the ground up, brand new recipes. Maybe an equal amount, 30-ish or so are those kinds of, like the fruited sour or the Extinction Event or whatever. And then, we have a core, probably like, again, 30 beers. It's probably like a pretty even division between them, just thinking about it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that.
And that's why you need a production manager, because that is a lot to keep track of.
For sure. It is a lot to keep track of. Yeah.
So we talked about it earlier, but the day that I visited was Frozen Firkenfest.
Yeah.
And you were serving a bunch of different variants of Firkin beer, or beers conditioned in Firkin. So like for you and the brewing team, what's the best part about experimenting with those kind of one-off fresh beers for just let's have fun?
It's getting to do really weird things. It's also nice to be able to turn over, when we're brewing, we don't currently have a pilot system. We are looking at getting one, but the smallest batch of beer we can currently make is about 15 barrels. So we have to make 15 barrels at a time. We're at 7,500 barrel a year brewery the last few years. Hoping to hit 10K in the next couple of years, but just for scale. So it's the opportunity to take a 5-gallon or 10-gallon batch of beer, out of a tank and get to do something that's like too bizarre to do at an amount in which we have to sell 15 barrels of it, right? So I think we had our Big Chungus, which is our Scottish ale brewed with heather, and we added Angelica root, which none of us had ever used before, but one of the cellar foreman wanted to use it, and it's supposed to impart like a kind of a celery note, and it definitely did, but in a different way than expected. And it was actually one of my favorite Firkins at the festival. I really liked the way it played with the caramel notes, but it's not something that we would have tried if it hadn't been, at that small scale. So
yeah, that sounds awesome. Angelica root, I'm gonna write that down and maybe play around with that myself. That sounds
Sure.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, let's take a beer break real quick here before we move on to some more questions, because we're doing it live now. We're
doing it live.
Yeah, okay. For the people that get that reference. Okay, so some facts about Des Moines as we start off the first episode featuring Des Moines this month. So it is the capital city of Omaha. It's got a population of around 700,000 people. So fairly large area, for a very large metropolitan area for the Midwest. Des Moines is a hot spot for insurance companies, and was named by a magazine as the third largest insurance capital in the world. I did not know that before I went there, and then as soon as I got there, like I started to see all the signs on the buildings, and I was like, oh yeah, these are all insurance companies. And according to 2020 data from the Brewers Association, there are 107 breweries in the state of Omaha, or in the state of Iowa. I still have Omaha in the brain. And we'll be featuring 4 from Des Moines and the surrounding area this week. Actually, one of them is from Ankeny, or not this week, this month. One of them's from Ankeny, and 2 of them are from Des Moines, and 1 is from Waukee. So Iowa has 4.7 breweries per capita. Is actually the 17th most in the U.S., which I found kind of surprising. That's a pretty strong beer scene, in the top 20 for breweries per capita, almost 5 breweries per person. And does anybody know what state is number 1? That's not rhetorical. Eric or Josh, if you know that, you could answer. Anybody in the chat?
I would guess it's
knows, could throw it.
Wisconsin. It's probably Wisconsin, but I'm not positive.
I know the answer, so I'm not gonna. I feel wrong.
Oh yeah, you've seen.
sharing.
Oh yeah, Eric.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, you've seen the
I'm
outline.
cheating.
Anybody in the chat? Jared.
It's Jared got it.
Yeah, Jared. It is Vermont.
The answer is Vermont.
With 15 breweries per person in the state of Vermont. But there isn't like a lot of people in the state of Vermont. It's basically just like everybody in Burlington. But yeah, let's.
So can we figure out the math? If it's like if you're in a room with 20 people, how many of them own a brewery? Like we could we could work backwards that way. You guys want to drink the second beer here? I've been eyeing it up.
Absolutely.
So this next one is the Des Moines IPA. Josh, let's talk a little bit about IPAs because I mean Iowa is very center of the state, and of course you got your New England IPAs, you got your West Coast IPAs. Before I even break this one open here, can you sort of tell me where it came from, just as far as like your mindset and just maybe the taste or anything else that you might think is important?
Yeah, so this is our flagship beer. This we sell more than anything else, and according to our sales data, as well as scan data, it's the number 1 selling craft beer in Central Iowa.
Wow, very
nice.
Cool.
We move a lot of it. We make about 80 barrels a week and sell 80 barrels a week. So I was talking about 15 barrels before. So we have 8 barrel tanks. So this is a beer that you find. If you're in Central Iowa, if you're in Des Moines, you'll find this on tap everywhere. It's very popular. It has been around since our inception. It's the brainchild of owner and head brewer John Martin, who's my boss. And it is a classic IPA. We are very fortunate in this world of hazies. We still get to keep our lights on with a classic. And I would say not West Coast. I would say, maybe outside of the Midwest, people don't call them Midwest IPAs, but we tend to call this Midwest IPA. I would say we think of it, and I probably sound a little arrogant, but we think of it favorably in conjunction with Bell's Two Hearted, which is obviously a fantastic beer.
Yeah,
that's what immediately came to mind. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Yep.
Are you drinking one, Josh? Are you?
I am actually. I didn't know what we were drinking on the cast. My taproom manager who set up the whole thing didn't inform me of that. So I grabbed every brewer's favorite beer, which is a Pilsner, our Czech Pilsner. It just came out 2 weeks ago. It's Pilsner seasons for us, so that's what I'm putting.
I was gonna bring that up when we were drinking the Farmer John's because that has Zaz hops in it, and that's like the backbone of a Czech Pilsner, and they work very well in there and tie into that malt. But this Des Moines IPA is phenomenal.
This is so like the first word that came to my mind was well-rounded. Just like it's everything. Someone in the chat just said it's good for a non-IPA drinker. Like this is a kind of beer. Like sometimes you'll go to those bars where it's like, yeah, we have a Dogfish Head 60 Minute on is our only IPA. Other than that, we have your Miller Coors, every other thing. I could like see this being there. Like I could see my dad, who's a strict Coors Light drinker, having this and going, I wouldn't get it all the time, but it's pretty good. We
get a lot of that. You're exactly right. Yeah.
That's perfect. It's got, it's an IPA, so it does have that apparent bitterness. There is like a little bit of juiciness to it, but it is not, not overwhelming at all. Nothing like a double crazy IPA or anything like that. You get hit with that sweetness, and then it just sort of finishes off with the bitterness. A very, very, very quick ride, if you will. And it's everything from you want from an IPA, especially I think the caramel malts definitely add some to it there. It's a little bit darker in color than I think I was expecting at first. And that just adds to the sweetness and the sort of well-roundedness. So I congratulate you, but more importantly, I congratulate myself for drinking this right now.
So Josh, you talked a lot about, releasing, or you talked already about releasing new recipes and the push to, release these new beers and iterate on other base recipes. But I think what a lot of people maybe at home don't realize is how there might be some changes year to year, even with a flagship, because of different hop lots and different hops that are available. So could you talk maybe a little bit about what it's like to not iterate on a flagship, but to make it be the same beer every year, even
Yeah.
if your materials aren't exactly the same every year?
Yeah. So Des Moines IPA is a really great example of the sometimes struggle that we go through with that. So the base malt, we haven't had to change that. It's always been Churro and Simpson's Golden Promise, which is a beautiful base malt for those who know. Simpson's Golden Promise is lovely.
The best malt.
But yeah. And then a little bit of caramel malt, like you guys said, just in that kind of classic IPA style. But the malt has never been a tremendous challenge. Sometimes with some beers that are cores, we'll get an opportunity to try, like we have a Citra Blonde Ale that we released in the summer that's quite popular, Southside Citra. And we used to make it with Castle Belgian Pils, and then it became hard to get, and so we had to find a substitute. So we used Dingman's, which is another Belgian Pils, and it made the beer well. It made it nice, but we just were able to get Castle Pils back again from a different supplier from Europe. So we went back to it, and I think the beer is just like a little bit better. I think the average person, when they're drinking it, when you go in, you order, you sit down, and you're just drinking the beer to enjoy it and not really analyzing it, right? Like you might not catch those kind of subtle nuances, but if you're really sitting in sensory, you're really trying to evaluate the beer, especially side by side. You can pick up on them. And Des Moines IPA is a difficult beast because hops absolutely vary lot to lot and year to year, like all the time. If you're not InBev or like maybe like Belgium or Bell's, right? Sierra Nevada, where you're going out and you're picking your lot every single year, and you're just like, this farm is ours.
First dibs on all the hops. Yeah.
Right, exactly. If you're not one of those, we get to do some lot selection. We have been able to do that recently, so that helps a little bit in terms of picking the ones that match the flavor profile that we want to continue the consistency of Des Moines IPA. But sometimes it's just about, you get a new lot in, and we do sensory every week, and Des Moines IPA, because of what a significant beer it is to us, is a part of that sensory every single week. We're always constantly evaluating every single batch. We brew it every week, so we're evaluating each new packaged batch. And how close is it true to brand? And we have several of the brew teams sit around and drink it and rate it, like how close it is to brand. And when we realize over a course of several batches that something is trending in a direction that we don't want it to, then we look at the recipe and we look at our ingredients and we evaluate, okay, I still remember, so this beer is like C hop heavy, right? Centennial, Columbus, Cascade. So I remember maybe 3-4 years ago, we got a new lot of Columbus, and Columbus is definitely like the smallest portion, but it's like a hop that hits heavy, like in small amounts. And the new one was just like so much danker, but it also is like a little more garlicky. And we had to dial it back. And I'm talking in like a 60 barrel batch or an 80 barrel batch when we were brewing at the time, like dialing back by like a half a pound in the whole thing. And it changed the flavor and dialed us back in. So it can be really minor adjustments.
Wow. I don't think people are starting to know, like, everyday drinkers are starting to recognize hop names and learn a little bit more about hops. But it's always amazes me how much variance there is between just different lots of hops in the same year, or just growing them in different areas, and the variance that could happen. So it's always cool to talk about that stuff with brewers.
Yeah.
Hey Josh, I do have a question I want to ask, but I also want to share a question that's been it's been asked in the chat. Who does your artwork? Someone's pointed out that says local artist Vance. I don't know if you want to give any shout outs or if you know anything about that.
Yeah, so we kind of do a mix on our cans a little bit. So uh, we have a design studio that we're like one of their bigger clients, I think, and they've been with us from the beginning. It's 818 Design Studio here in town, and they're lovely and super talented, and they help design a lot of the labels off of whatever our weird branding ideas are. They actually make them come to life. But we also try to routinely use local artists to draw the labels for us, and then 818 will take it and put it into label form so that the printer can print it. We can apply it to the can. So Vance is a local Des Moines area artist. The vast majority of our cores, so we have 5 core beers currently. 3 of those cores are each by a different local Des Moines artist. 2 of the cores were designed by 818. So
Very cool.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Absolutely, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Iowa Green Brewery Certificate. I saw it said it on the can here. Can you talk a little bit? We don't have a lot of time, but just talk a little bit about what they are and if they offered any like guidance on what to do, and how has that changed the production side of things?
Yeah, so I'm sure it's not as difficult as getting a certification like that in California, right? Like Iowa's controls are not as stringent as other places.
Okay.
That's for sure. But that was actually like kind of a passion project of our office manager and like part-time accountant, Rebecca Bowen. She's definitely like a greenie, which we love, and she really wanted to see what she could do to get us to be, generally a more environmentally aware brewery. There was a lot of feedback from the account. They came in and walked around and were like, here's the things that we look at. Here's like the first steps you can do, right? So the bronze certification is the beginning. That's kind of just the first step on the journey. And so we were able to do like some of the smaller things that didn't impact us a lot, but a lot of it's like not putting a lot of the yeast down the drain, not things that would be pretty obvious, I think, if you thought about it for a while. We kind of took those first steps, and then they gave us a list of things to do to get to silver and gold, and that's part of our next one of our next focuses is to see how we can bring and integrate those into production. So it's all a matter of like trying to be as good as we can while also not making everybody's life miserable by having to jump through a bunch of different hoops in the middle of a 10-hour brew day or whatever. And so, I think that part of our brewery, I'm proud that we have the certification, and I hope that we can continue to be better than we are
Sure.
now.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. Thank you for that.
It's always great when you can when a brewery is focused on more things than just like producing great beer. Like that's the bottom line, but like if they could have a focus on like having an impact on the environment in their local area or having an impact on their community, that's like the beer plus.
Right.
Yep.
Beer. Yeah. We had a question. Beer plus. I couldn't think of a good reference there. Oh man. So we had a question in the chat from Nick. Farmer John's is a great beer. What he said, we certainly agree. But is Farmer John a real person? I always just assumed that was just like.
It is. It's actually so.
Oh.
John Martin, like I said, the owner, head brewer, my boss. It's his father. It's homage to his father, who is also John Martin, and John grew up in Imogene, Iowa. Obviously, Iowa is a very agricultural town or agricultural state, and Imogene is a small town to the south west of us. I hope I got that right. I'm pretty positive southwest. John would be mad if I didn't, but that's where he grew up on a farm, and has a lot of respect for his father and everything that he did to raise his family of I think 7 or 8 kids, so big family, and he has a lot of love and passion for farming in general because of his background. So Farmer John's is an homage to his father and to farming in general, which is why it's a multi-grain ale. That's why it includes so many different grains, because he kind of just wanted to be like, I want to get as much of the bounty of the earth into a beer as I can. So
very cool.
Yeah. Podcast listeners will remember one of last month's beer breaks mentioned that Nebraska grows the third most corn out of states in the United States. Iowa is one of the states that grows more than Nebraska. Corn facts.
Yeah, take that, Nebraska.
Yeah. So, Josh, one thing that we like to ask all of our guests, we talk a lot about beer, tourism, travel, and stuff like that on this podcast, but what is one thing that you wish Des Moines was more well known for?
Well, always beer, right? Like that's got to be the first. That's got to be the first answer. I don't know if I really want Des Moines to be more well known for anything in particular. Iowa is always going to be categorized as a flyover state, just the nature of our position and the fact that we're an agricultural state and not like densely populated. And I think a lot of us here are kind of okay with that. But what I would hear a lot, particularly when I worked in the service industry, and you were mentioning earlier that this is Des Moines in particular is an insurance capital, and it is like a lot of the big insurance companies have their office headquarters here, and that's a significant portion of our employee base, I guess, in Des Moines. But it also means that we have a lot of out of town travelers from the other regions and offices, and they come in and they work, in these centralized offices for a couple of days out of the week, and then they fly back home on the weekends. But often as a bartender, up in the Red Monk, if you come out to Des Moines, definitely go to the Red Monk. But up there, I would hear kind of repeated over and over again. I had no idea that Des Moines was kind of a cool town, such a cool town, and there's it's just fun to hang out in. I would say Des Moines is kind of, to me, the reason that I'm here is because it's kind of the perfect size. I get to feel like I'm living in a city in a bustling metropolis. Like you said, we're 750,000 people in the metro area. So there's enough people that there's at least one good thing of everything, right? There's for sure a good burger joint. There's a great taco place. There's a great, but it's also small enough that it only takes me 25 minutes to get from anywhere to anywhere. And I don't have to worry about traffic, Those kinds of things are really nice. They're a really good reason to live in the city. We have amazing beer, amazing food, just kind of a good foodie Midwestern culture in general. And I think people tend to be surprised when they come to Des Moines to find that out.
That's awesome. I think that Brian and I can relate to that, because I think Pittsburgh's a little bit of that small city, vibe where, it's small, but there's enough going on and it's easy enough to get around where there's normally something going on. So that's pretty cool. This all is honestly kind of making me want to go out to Des Moines sometime. And someone's talking about Cleveland. One day I'll leave Pittsburgh. I haven't gone on a vacation in years, but one day I'll get out and I'll go to all these cool places. Well, I have one last question, and I'm actually going to sort of lump it in with a question that somebody else is asking in the chat here. Is self-distribution allowed in Iowa? And I'm supposed to ask, where can people find your beers? But really, I want to know, where can I find more of your beers?
Yeah, you bet. So yes, self-distribution is allowed. We actually self-distribute all of our beers in addition to distributing for a few other craft breweries. So we're sort of unique in the state. It's that model from, why am I blanking on Stone? So Stone did this for a long time, right? I don't know that they still do, if they still self-distribute in California or not, but they self-distributed there, and they also took on a lot of other craft breweries that were looking for somebody to distribute. So we do something similar. We have a whole wing of our business that's just designed to that. And I guess I'll talk about it just for a second, just because I think it's so important to our business model, because it means that everybody that touches our beer all the way to the customer, as well as the people that are cleaning the line and checking up on, the beer added accounts or whatever, those are all people that work for Confluence and that love Confluence beer. And I think it just helps us maintain a fantastic level of quality and consistency from beginning to end. So yes, it is allowed. We do it. We do more of it than anybody in the state. And you can find our beer. The easiest place to find it is in a Hy-Vee grocery store in the vast majority of the state, because they carry everybody's everything. But we're as far east as the Quad Cities now: Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, obviously through much of central Iowa, and then we're just kind of dipping our toe into Council Bluffs on the western border. So if you're in the Northwest, we're not really there yet. There's not that's kind of the super low population dense part of the state. And because we self-distribute, we have to have routes. Every beer that gets distributed by us gets distributed from our brewery in Des Moines. That it gets loaded into our van that morning and then taken somewhere. So we have drivers driving across the state and then back home every single day. They work really hard. But
fresh beer.
Yeah.
How far is your longest route?
So I think it takes about 2.5, maybe 2 hours and 45 minutes to get into the farthest part of the Quad Cities. So those guys, they're just starting with a 5-hour to 6-hour driving day, and then they still have to hit the stops and drop the beer off and whatnot. So that tends to be the guy that does that. When he does it, it's usually a 10, 11, sometimes 12-hour day, but at least he gets short Mondays and Fridays to make up for it. So
nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. This has been great. I mean, I'm loving these beers. I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna hang out with you, and we're gonna drink more and talk more.
Great.
Talk about beards. That's gonna be our separate podcast. We're just gonna talk about beards. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Brian?
Josh, for joining us. Thanks, Eric, for co-hosting.
You're so welcome.
And of course, thanks to Confluence for the great beers. You could check out more from Confluence at confluencebrewing.com. You can find more from us at brewvana.com. Josh, anywhere else we should follow for Confluence stuff?
I think mostly our Instagram account. I think that's where most of our stuff gets posted. So every single beer we release every week, if you want to see what we're releasing, check out the Instagram.
Yep. At Confluence Brew?
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Awesome. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Untapped at Brewvana. Check out the Brewvana Beer Club at brewvana.com to get beers like this shipped to you every month. We'll be back next week with some great beers from our next featured brewery, Exile, another awesome Des Moines brewery. And we'll be joined by 2 guests from Exile, and we'll be drinking 2 beers. 2 beers, 2 guests. Symmetry. Until then, stay safe, be kind, and support your local breweries. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.